Is prison the most effective form of punishment? To answer this question, first we must ask, what is punishment? According to the Criminal Justice Act of 2003, the purposes which judges and magistrates may pursue in deciding their sentence is the punishment of offenders, the reduction of crime, the reform and rehabilitation of offenders, the protection of the public, and making the reparation by offenders to persons affected by their offence. As well as this, it's been suggested by Rush that the immediate function of punishment is to prevent people from breaking the laws. Prison punishes offenders in all of these ways. It acts as a symbolic function as the removal of offenders from society, and restricting their freedom sends a clear and strong message to both offenders and the general public that criminal behaviour is not accepted and that there are severe consequences. As well as this, it shows that the negative attitude that the general public and non-offenders have towards criminal behaviour, and shows that this attitude is acknowledged and respected by the state, and punishments are in place to demonstrate this as well as protect those who have not themselves offended. Prison is a symbol of the consequences and therefore emphasises the threat of the possible consequences for wrongful behaviour. Prison also incapacitates the offenders and stops individuals from committing crimes. Incapacitation does not only apply to prisons, as other punishment methods also incapacitate offenders. However, prison aims to physically stop them from preventing more crimes for the duration of their sentence. However, this isn't always the case, as crime within prisons still happens with things such as assaults on both officers and inmates, which, as you can see on the graph, is on the rise. But crimes committed against society are prevented, as prison only temporarily incapacitates an individual for the duration of their sentence. The offender can still reoffend once they are released, which could be a potential flaw to this punishment. As well as stopping crimes from occurring physically, prison aims to deter people from committing crimes in the first place. The concept of a consequence for bad actions may stop individuals from behaving in a negative way, as they do not wish to face these consequences. It may also persuade them to abide by the rules set by society rather than break them. As well as punishing an offender, prison aims to reform and rehabilitate offenders in an effort to reduce crime upon release. Prison reforms offenders whether by personal example or through training, education, work experience, treatment programs, group work and counselling. Positive and progressive prison regimes aim to reduce future crimes by working with the offenders and not against them. Abolitionists argue that because prison has the potential to damage an individual with factors such as employment difficulty after release and institutionalization within the prison should not be used at all, or its use should at least be limited to the worst crimes. Current abolitionists argue that prison should be used as a last resort once all other options have been considered, for example, things such as restorative justice. Another potential punishment for worst crimes is the capital punishment. It was abolished in the UK in 1969, so we no longer use it, unlike places like America, making prison the primary punishment for crime. However, some may argue that capital punishment is the most appropriate punishment for severe crimes, as it demonstrates an eye for an eye, which is a clear deterrent. In recent survey, it was found that 45% of people support the reintroduction of capital punishment in the UK. One justification for this may be that it permanently incapacitates the offender rather than just temporarily like prisons. However, there are ethical issues concerned with this, as everyone has a right to life, even those that commit the worst crimes. As it is only applicable to those who have committed the most severe crimes, capital punishment is not effective or applicable to lesser crimes for which other punishments may be more appropriate. An example of where capital punishment could have prevented recidivism in the UK is the case of Simon Mellors, who brutally murdered his girlfriend and was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. He killed her in 1999 and was released 12 years after on good behaviour, and he didn't serve the full 14 years. Upon release, history repeated itself and he killed again. He killed another girlfriend, Janet Scott, in 2018, showing extremely similar behaviours in both instances, such as following or stalking and just making them feel extremely uncomfortable before eventually murdering them both quite brutally with horrible methods. This case shows flaws within the punishment method of imprisonment and rehabilitation, therefore supporting the idea that harsher punishments could be more effective in reducing certain crimes. Something which may have prevented this also is restorative justice, which is a process to involve the extent possible those who have a stake in a specific offence and collectively identify and address harms, needs, obligations in order to heal and put things right as possible, which was suggested by Marshall in 1999. This focuses on the needs of the victim as well as the offender. It is often used alongside imprisonment to rehabilitate offenders, however can cause victims to suffer more as they have to relive the traumatic events which occurred during the crime. Due to this, it isn't applicable to crimes that are traumatic, as people may not wish to speak about this. Although it does allow the offender to see the aftermath of their crime and the effects that it has caused. Although it isn't the most effective punishment, as it is often used alongside custodial sentences and not on its own. It may, however, increase the effectiveness of things such as prison as a punishment and reduce reoffending rates as they will realise what they have done. Another use is community sanctions, which provide rehabilitation and reparation as well as some form of punishment that's more cost-effective than imprisonment. It may be more effective punishment than prison for minimal crimes, as it has been found that shorter prison sentences have a higher recidivism rate. Community sanctions include some things such as supervision, which requires frequent meetings with a probation officer to rehabilitate and change the offender's behaviour. Non-compliance is not tolerated with this, and further punishments may be issued to an offender if they fail to meet the requirements. Another use is unpaid work, which gives back to the community as well as punishing the offender by restricting their freedom. It may include things such as gardening, which is often light labour. Additionally, there's the option of a curfew, which also restricts the freedom of the offender. This is done through electronic tagging and monitoring of the offender. It is cost-effective, unlike prison, which is extremely expensive due to living costs. However, it is flawed as it cannot monitor vast amounts of people, as that's too many people. In prison, you can put many more people in. Treatments are also available for those with substance abuse problems or mental health issues. So those that have had drug or alcohol issues, they are rehabilitated, which requires regular testing and monitoring of probation meetings to analyse their progress. Mental health treatment is available and requires regular appointments to mental health services, which helps the offenders to get better. However, it can be time-consuming to report upon this, and the offender must be willing to cooperate by attending the meetings and discussing their mental health. With reference to the purposes proposed by the Criminal Justice Act and Rush's definition of punishment, prison is the most effective form of punishment that is available at the moment, as it punishes the offender, reduces future crime, rehabilitates the offenders and protects the public. Although alternative punishments have benefits and somewhat successful in punishing an offender, prison has a well-rounded success in everything that criminal punishment aims to achieve, rather than limited factors like the alternatives seem to show. Regardless of this, prison methods could be improved and therefore would be even more effective. For example, more support and education for prisoners to offer them more opportunities upon release and teach them the appropriate ways to behave in society to avoid criminal behaviour.